Good afternoon. Marylee Nunley here with United Stroke Alliance. Today I'm going to talk to Jahnel. Jahnel's been with us since before we were anything. Meet Jahnel.
Don't know. I can't tell what you can see, so hello.
You're perfect, right in the middle. And those of you who are in the Peoria area know Jahnel. She's been with us for many years as a volunteer and as a board member and many other things, which we'll talk about. She's an RN, and she's a stroke coordinator at OSF St. Francis Hospital in the Illinois Neurological Institute. So everyone has a story. And today we're going to spend part of our time sharing Jan's and my story of how this all started. So I'm going to have her start with how we first met, and really the truth and authenticity of what she felt, what she was going through in those early years, and where we've come. So tell the story, and then I'll ask another question.
Oh, it's a wonderful story, at least for me. I met Marylee back in, I believe it was 2004. Okay.
The end of 2003.
The end of 2003, because I had just taken the job as the stroke coordinator. And Dr. Wong said, we have a meeting with Marylee Nunley from a stroke camp. She wants to talk with us. And I'm like, okay. So we went into this little break room and we had this meeting, and Marylee came to Dr. Wong and I and presented her idea of a stroke camp. And so, me being a new stroke coordinator, I didn't really know a whole lot of what to think, but Dr. Wong was totally enamored with the idea. He was so excited, and she had this great vision. She was ready to go, but she needed a couple things. She needed some financial backing, and she needed volunteers. And so Dr. Wong was like, no problem. I'll help you get some financial backing, and Jan will volunteer at camp. Okay, then. So the very first camp, I was volunteering, and I was thinking,
you were voluntold.
I was voluntold. I was kind of voluntold, yeah. But so I said, okay, I'm going to go to this camp. All I could think about was I just worked a 40-hour work week, and now I've got to spend an entire weekend at some camp. I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't know anything, but I'm going to go. So I got in my car and I drove to Lewiston and went to stroke camp, and it was just the most incredible, amazing, just life-altering experience for me. And I am so glad that Dr. Wong voluntold me to do that, and I am so blessed to have been able to see this camp grow, and the Stroke Alliance grow, and everything grow over the last few years. So that's my story. It wasn't like, Marylee picked me or anything. I was just, yep, you're going to go, and I did. And I'm so, so grateful.
So as a stroke coordinator, when you first started, you were early in that job, and over the years, I know you learn a lot. But as a stroke coordinator, and maybe if there's a stroke coordinator watching this video that hasn't done camp yet, or those that do, what did it mean to you as a stroke coordinator to spend maybe those first 2 or 3 years? Because you've gone every year since the very beginning. But what has that done maybe to change your job, to change your vision? What has that meant to you in your job as a stroke coordinator?
There's so many things that I can think of that it's changed. I think the first year that I went, just being new in the role, it really helped me understand what happens after you leave the hospital, because I was only seeing, as a nurse for many years in neuro, I only saw the acute part of it, and then people would go to rehab and they would go home, but I never saw the after. I never got to really see what the caregivers went through and what the stroke survivors went through. And that first year really showed me that side of stroke. So, the struggles, the challenges, the social, isolation, the caregiver, not really burnout, but just, the struggles that caregivers went through as well. So that first year, I really learned a lot about that. But then over the years, what I've learned is just a lot of things about things that people need once they're out of the hospital. It helped me to redevelop our teaching, our education to patients. It helped me to understand, what to talk with caregivers about, what kind of resources we need to have in our communities. Just really taught me a lot of things about how I wanted our program to run. What they were feeling when they came to the emergency room, what they were feeling, when the doctors came in and told them they had a stroke. And so I really wanted to help develop our program so that I was doing we were doing everything that we could do to make that the smoothest transition all the way till they went to camp.
Oh, that's a great segue, because your hospital has sponsored a camp for over 10 years. And tell me a little bit about what that means to you to have your hospital sponsor a camp.
Well, it means a lot to me because, like I said, from day one, that very first camp, I was hooked, and it just became part of my soul and part of, what I felt was an important thing to do in life and in work. And so I've been very, very fortunate that OSF and I has sponsored a camp, and they've been very supportive of it. I sometimes have to do a lot of begging and hoping that, this year we're going to be able to do it. But they've always come through, and they've always been supportive of the camps. So it really means a lot to me that our hospital has sponsored a camp for as long as they have. And, that we feel that it's an important continuation of the patients that we care for, their recovery.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of a random question that just popped into my head, and it goes back to a couple of years ago when you invited me to the opening of Joint Commission, when the Joint Commission was there. And
those fun days.
See, the thing is, you guys are so stressed and you hate it, and I'm an extrovert. I was having a blast watching all these little presentations and such. But I have to tell you, from my perspective, I was so touched when the examiners were discussing the section on camp, which is part of the requirement, I think, isn't it, with Joint Commission? Isn't it the community outreach? Or
the community outreach, yeah.
The part of the community outreach.
Yeah.
And it just warmed my heart that they were so positive and so on board with how important camp was. So that was kind of fun for me. After a few stroke camps, a lot of the people started saying things like, I didn't know the signs of stroke. I took a nap. So a couple years later, a couple years after we started doing the camps, we started doing our youth education programs and our strikeout strokes. You've been involved with that youth education from the beginning, and would you talk a little bit about the youth education program that you participate in, and maybe a success story or two that has come out of that? Because we've been doing that here in the Peoria area. We're hoping to expand it nationally. And we're working towards that. But can you talk a little bit about the youth education, what that means to you?
Sure. The youth education on stroke is we do fifth grade education. It started out being fifth grade education. Now it's got a formal title, Youth Education on Stroke, because we're coming up in the world. But we go out to area grade schools and educate students on the signs and symptoms of stroke. What to do if they recognize somebody having a stroke, and then just a couple of quick little things about how they can keep themselves healthy so that hopefully they don't have a stroke. We take a stroke survivor out there so that they can see people with disabilities. They can see that not all strokes are the same. And they can ask questions of the stroke survivors. And then we do some really fun little disability simulations with them, because they have to sit there and listen to me drone on for about 10 minutes about what a stroke is and the signs and symptoms. So then we let them get up and move around a little bit and do some disability simulations, and they love that. We ask them to put a belt on with one hand, or put a shirt on and button it. This year we did some extra things with like having the girls try to put their hair in a ponytail with one hand, or fill out a form. So just things that they do every day that they take for granted, and what it's like to do it with one hand. And they get to see that some of them can do it with one hand, some of them can't. Some of them find it to be very hard. Some of them get really frustrated. But they learn that with practice, with maybe thinking outside the box about how to do things, that they can actually maybe accomplish it. Maybe not the way that they did it before. So it's a really good lesson for them to know that just because someone has a stroke doesn't mean that their life is over, or they're never going to be able to do things again. They're just going to be doing it a little bit different. So I absolutely love doing it. I always, before I became a nurse, I always wanted to be a teacher. And so this kind of lets me be both. So I absolutely love it. I look forward to it every year. And I think the thing that just really excites me is when I hear of someone that came in because their grandson or their son or daughter recognized that they were having a stroke. I did a 5th grade education in Washington at Beverly Manor School several years ago, and there was a brother and sister. They were a year apart, but they both had the 5th grade education. And their grandfather was visiting from Phoenix, and he started to have symptoms, and both of the kids recognized that, did the FAST exam, ran and got help, and told their parents that they needed to call 911. Their grandfather was able to get to the hospital very, very quickly. He was able to get treated with TPA, and was walking out of the hospital the next day. It might have been the following day after, but very quickly he was out of the hospital and on his way back to Arizona. And so those kids saved his life, and I was actually able then to talk with them and do a news story with them. And it makes me cry every time I look at the video, but just how happy and grateful that they were, that they knew that information, and that they were able to do something to help their grandfather. So seeing that just made it all worthwhile. And then I've had several other kids that have recognized it as well. We also had a student that recognized a teacher. And then I was actually down at a community education fair, I think it was last summer, and down at one of the churches, and it was mostly for the kids. It was a back to school thing, but they asked us to set up a booth. So we took some squishy brains and some stuff down there. We're always looking for opportunities to educate about stroke. So this little girl, they come up and they want to know what you're giving away. So this little girl comes up to me and she says, "So what are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, we're talking about stroke." "Oh, I know everything there is to know about stroke." And I'm like, "You do?" And she said, "Yeah." She goes, "That fast face?" She went through the whole thing. Face, have them smile. Arms, have them put their arms out. Speech, have them say a sentence. And I'm like, "Wow, you really, really do know a lot." She goes, "Yeah. And 2 million brain cells die every minute during stroke. So you have to call 911 right away." I'm like, "Boy, you really do know a lot about stroke." And she goes, "Yeah, somebody came to my school one time and told me about it." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, where do you go to school?" She told me the school that she went to, and I said, "You know what?" I said, "I think I was at your school." She kind of cocked her head and looked at me, and she goes, you were. And I said, well, I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. You paid really good attention. So that just made me feel so good that, I had been at her school maybe 6 months, before that. And she remembered all of that. So it's just a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful program. And I really hope that we can grow it and, expand it. And I've done all I can to try to encourage other coordinators to do this. And a lot of them have done some education with the students in their communities. So it's awesome.
Really appreciating what you're sharing with us today. So I'm going to turn the camera back around so you can tell everybody goodbye.
Well, Marylee, thank you for having me, and thank you for trusting me to be part of your vision and keeping me around for all these years and letting me, be involved in all of these things, because I absolutely love it.